Good evening, dear friends, and thank you for joining us as we continue with our final stretch of the travel with Dante and Virgil into the spheres of hell. As we continue with our seminar, today we will go into part six, where we cover the details behind the eighth and the ninth spheres, which are the spheres of Uranus and Neptune. So, as we continue with our particular travels, we will see that Dante and Virgil, they approached the first of what can also be thought of as chasms or valleys. These chasms are like fractures or openings on the ground that lead to very deep canyons within the realm of hell. And this is what they come to see as they walk into the eighth sphere. As they look around, they notice that this particular area is filled with tormented sinners that are walking in both directions to and fro. And there are demons with horns that are constantly flogging them just to keep them moving. So as Dante and Virgil come close to the rim of the third pit or the trench of the eighth circle, he comes to find out those who are guilty of simony. Friends, these are sinners that use their positions in the church for monetary gain. In his work, we come to learn that the simonists, those who have committed the sin of buying or selling sacred things, they are all upside down and they find themselves in round holes that are the size of small baptismal fonts. From each of those holes protrude their feet, and they also can see the legs of the spirits. And the rest of the body happens to be upside down in the hole. The soles of their feet happen to be on fire. And Dante notices that there is one shade who is apparently suffering more torment than the others, moving and shaking violently, and his feet are burning more fiercely than any of the others. Dante then looks down upon the faces of the sinners in the next chasm, and he weeps with grief at their torment. These sinners, they must walk through eternity with their heads on backwards and tears in their eyes. Virgil notices Dante's state and he reproaches him for feeling any pity for these sinners, because these sinners are fortune tellers and diviners. They happen to be here as a point of justice. And they sinned because they were trying to foretell the future, a future which is known only to God. So notice that as they are walking in this particular area, they first come over all of those particular souls that have been sinning by selling sacred things. These are the very same that sell salvation. These are those people who sell that space in heaven if you just give of your jewels and your money and the little that you don't have. This are also those who encourage others to get themselves in further debt by making use of their credit cards and making use of lending and of borrowing money from lenders so that they can give it to the quote unquote church so that they can guarantee their place in heaven. You see, these are those who speak of planting that seed of prosperity. It's interesting to see them being buried head first, because this immediately reminds us of Arcanum 16, that arcanum of the fulminated tower, where there is that lightning that comes from heaven, and as the tower is destroyed, then in that arcanum we see a man and a woman that are precipitated deep into the sphere of hell, head first, like an inverted star. And as he comes across the fortune tellers and diviners, well, he finds them walking back and forth, but with their heads turned on backwards, as if going in one direction and seeing something different, as in moving in one direction and being unable to see the reality. Friends, these are then the fortune tellers, and the diviners, because it has been told, and this is based on what Dante writes, that they were trying to foretell the future, which is known only to God. But what happens? Dante and Virgil, they make their way into the fifth chasm, which is very dark, and it is filled with a boiling pitch. Dante notices that there is a demon carrying a sinner. The demon tosses the sinner into the pitch, saying that he is going back for more sinners to place in the chasm of grafters. These grafters are those who are corrupted, those who have altered things, and they have damaged the original creation. The other demons want the sinner to get beneath the pitch, or the sinners will taste their grappling hooks. And at that point, Virgil confronts the demons, and they threaten to harm him. He asks to speak to one of them, and Malakota, who is the leader of the demons, steps forward. And after hearing about Virgil's divinely inspired journey, Malakota grants the poets safe passage and rounds up a group of 10 demons to escort them to the next bridge. Dante sees himself afraid of the demons, and he pleads with Virgil to go on without them. But Virgil reprimands him for his fear, and then reminds him that the demons are there only to guard and torture the sinners in the stew of pitch. One sinner happens to be slow at ducking back into the pitch fast enough, and he is caught by one of the demons, who pulls him out of the pitch by his hair. Before the demons tear him to shreds, Dante asks if he can listen to the sinner's story. The sinner replies that he was born in Navarre and that he worked for a king and he began to graft. Friends, when we speak here of grafting, grafting has many different connotations, but in any kind it speaks of a corruption of the original creation, because any kind of physical or genetic alteration is a grafting. Every time that we see the transplantation of a tissue, that is considered a grafting as well. So the thing here is that even though today we see grafting as a way to create new things that can help improve the life of humanity, these are all just the many wonders and marvels of what is known as the false science. Grafting always involves some kind of alteration to the original content. So as this man shares his story and says that he is from Navarre and that he worked for a king and began to graft, which is the reason he now suffers in the pitch, the demons begin to tear at the sinner. And to avoid this punishment, he offers them a deal. The sinner says that he will whistle as if he had been set free, and that he's going to be calling more sinners, especially oh, back at that time, Italians with whom Dante will want to speak. And he wanted to lure all those other sinners to the surface of the pitch so that they could all suffer at the hands of the demons as well. The demons are, of course, very suspicious, but they let him try his plan, warning him that if he tried to escape, that they would catch him. And the sinner, once set free, he jumped off the ridge into the safety of the pitch, and he escaped. The demons became furious at the deception, and they flew after him. And when they saw that he had escaped, two of the demons began fighting, and they also fell into the pitch, and they were unable to rise. The other demons, they tried to form a rescue party, and while they were occupied, the poets used the opportunity just to continue walking away unnoticed. And then they arrived at the next chasm, which is filled with the spirits that are walking very slowly as if they were carrying a heavy burden. These are the shades of the hypocrites, and they wear cloaks and hoods that are dazzling with their glitter, but they are lined with lead. And these And these particular shades, as Dante and Virgil happen to be walking and turn towards their left, they notice that they happen to be walking faster than all of these particular shades, and they notice that they are weighted down, that these are the weighted down hypocrites. So Dante asks Virgil to slow down to see if he finds one of those spirits that he may know. And two spirits approach without speaking, but one of them observes that Dante must be alive because he noticed that his throat was moving. And speaking to Dante, they ask why he has come to the valley of the hypocrites. They have their conversation, and as they continue walking, Dante sees a figure on the ground that is being held by three stakes. Friar Catalan, which was that previous shade talking to him, explained that that is Caiaphas, the high priest who told the council of Pharisees that it was better for Jesus to die than for the whole nation to perish. And as a consequence, he lies where each one who passes by must step upon him. Finally, Dante turns and he asks the friar if there is a bridge over the chasm. And the friar answers that all were destroyed at the same time, but that the travelers, that they may climb out of the ruins of the one nearby without much difficulty. Notice how as they arrive into this particular chasm, they find people who are walking very slowly, carrying with their own burdens. And those burdens are presented in the symbol of a cloak and a hood. And Dante describes this as hooded cloaks that on the outside they're dazzling with glitter. They seem to be fancy and attractive. They are appealing to the eye, but on the inside, that they are lined with lead. What we see on the outside is beauty, and on the inside, we see the lead of the personality. We see something that is heavy and difficult to carry. And this is a symbol of the ill will. What we see here is all of those internal Pharisees that we carry within. Those who on the outside are shiny, they're attractive, they seem to be wise, they are appealing to the eye. But on the inside, they bring us sorrow and pain because it is because of those internal Pharisees that we bring ill will and we bring so much suffering to so many others. And thus, this is exactly why Dante and Virgil come across Caiaphas, bound by three stakes to the ground, so that everyone who walks by will have the opportunity of stepping on him as well. After the poets reach the end of the bridge, they see the masses of serpents and sinners in the seventh chasm where the thieves reside. All the sinners are naked, their hands are tied behind them, and there is a serpent whose head and tail are threaded through the spirit's body at the loins and tied in coils and knots at the front. Another serpent sinks its fangs in the neck of a shade, who immediately takes a fire and burns to ashes and falls to the ground, only to resume its shape and its torment once again. Here we see that the poets continue then moving onto the eighth chasm, where Dante sees thousands of little flames reminding him of fireflies on the hillside. He leans so far forward on the edge of the bridge that he almost falls into the chasm. Virgil says that each one of those flames contains a sinner, which is hidden from view by the fire surrounding it, and that these are then evil counselors, people who use their power and their intellect for evil. All of these shades that Dante and Virgil come across and see in this particular chasm, in chasm 7 and chasm 8, these are all sinners that are suffering by their own passions. Notice how in the seventh chasm, they come across all of these souls that have particular serpents that are intertwined and coiled and bound into their bodies. Serpents that bind them, that bite them, that cause them to burn and turn into ashes, just for those shades to be recreated, reborn again in that instant, and continue going through that particular torment. All of those serpents, those are serpents of our animal passions. Those are the serpents of temptation that lead us into cruelty and the abuse of others. And of course, whenever we are making use of our intellect to come up with ways to harm others and to manifest evil, whenever we make use of our social, economical, or political power to bring suffering to others, well, then there is suffering that certainly awaits us. As we continue down the different cantos and comedy, as we get to canto number 28, it opens with Dante wondering how to describe the sinners in the ninth chasm. This is the place of the sowers of discord and scandal, and the creators of dissension. These are the creators of schism. Schism is dissension that happens within a church. He warns that the punishment in this part of hell is bloody and grotesque. And indeed, the sinners in the ninth chasm, they're damned to walk around the chasm until they arrive at a devil who slashes them with a long sword according to the nature of their sin. As they circle the chasm, their wounds would happen to heal, but when they complete the circle, the wounds are renewed by a devil with a sword. These sinners, they were the ones who were responsible for scandal and rift, and therefore they are torn apart in this particular sphere as they tore apart others in life. While Virgil and Dante are talking, they reach the bridge over the 10th and the final chasm of the 8th circle. And here they see the suffering and hear the wails and weeping of the falsifiers. The noise is so loud that Dante covers his ears, and the stench is so powerful that it reminds him of rotting human flesh lying exposed out to the world. Dante compares their state to that of those who are miserable people who cram the hospitals at the different cities. These are souls that are laying about as if dying from pestilence and disease, some laying gasping, some lean on one another, and some happen to be picking on one another's scabs as if they were scaling fish. As we make a stop here at the end of this particular eighth sphere of hell, we can go back into the writings of Daniel. And in his book, in chapter 2, we find that it reads, "And many of them that sleep in the dust of the earth shall awake, some to everlasting life, and some to shame and everlasting contempt. But you, O Daniel, shut up the words and seal the book, even to the time of the end. Many shall run to and fro, and knowledge shall be increased." As Daniel has his prophetic visions, those prophetic visions being experiences that he deliberately manifested in the astral plane, he comes back and is able to write down and give us this particular knowledge. In the book of Daniel here, we see in a very summarized way the to and fro of people who are walking. The very same to and fro that we see not only of those particular shades that exist within the realms of hell, but also the wandering that we come to see around in our lives as we go about looking for more knowledge, looking for more wisdom, and immersing ourselves deliberately into more theories, into more things that are of a kinder for humanity. His innermost tells him, "You, O Daniel, shut up the words and seal the book, even to the time of the end, and knowledge shall be increased." It is necessary for us to close that particular chapter in our lives. We have gotten the opportunity to receive this unveiled wisdom by Samael Aumbeor. It is here in Gnosis where we have come to receive the very best of the Hindi traditions, the very best of Buddhism, the very best of the many aspects of yoga, whether it is Raha or Bhakti or Agni Yoga or any kind of the yogas that are being practiced, because yoga is that one thing that brings reunion with the innermost. It is not just the yoga of postures and stretches and etc. Here in Gnosis, we come to receive the very best of the philosophy of the ancient cultures, of their ancient traditions, of the understanding of their symbols, of the practices and the exercises that can truly affect a transformation in us. But for as long as we continue submerged in theories, we will be living here something that is very similar to the torment that is experienced by the shades in that eighth sphere. As they go to and fro, going through the sufferings of the catabolic forces of nature that will eventually bring them to an end, we right here are bouncing left and right, going and coming back into different theories, looking for that one key that is going to bring us that instantaneous happiness. And that, my friends, is a self-imposed lie of the ego. We certainly cannot find a silver bullet that is just going to solve all of our mistakes and redeem us from all of our problems just in an instant. We cannot talk ourselves out of these inferior things that we have behaved into for so many years and for so many lives. And this requires of an internal transformation. And we see that on the influence of the planet Uranus, we have the forces and the instruments that are necessary to effect the transformation itself. As we contemplate up in the heavens, the second sphere of the tree of life, which is the sphere of Chokmah, is the sphere of the cosmic Christ. It is there where we see the manifestation of the fire that leads the development of creation. And this particular sphere, influenced by the planet Uranus, happens to be very important for us because Uranus has a direct influence over our sexual creative organs. And every so many years, the poles of the planet Uranus will shift and they will point towards the sun. As that happens, depending on the polarity that is facing towards the sun, we will see on Earth the influence of men or women. We will see one of them dominating or influencing more over the masses and over the other. And this is not done just to have one of either man or woman being more powerful, certainly not. It is just that in the harmony and rhythm of creation, the forces that are positive and negative, masculine and feminine, in this particular case, come to influence us so that we can continue to work together. Because at times it is the man, the one who has to lead. And the moment that the man becomes unable to lead, of course, the woman comes to lead him and save him. The planet Uranus has a direct influence over our sexual creative organs. And as a consequence, it invites us into an internal transformation. Because with us, under the revolutionary influence of the constellation of Aquarius, we can then make use of these creative powers so that we can walk ourselves back through that narrow door of the Garden of Eden. Men and women, united together, have the opportunity of awakening that sacred fire that exists with them and within them. And in alchemy, The man is symbolized with the element of tin. The woman is always symbolized by the element of copper. So when man and woman come together in that flaming forge of Vulcan, they take these two metals and they combine them. And when copper and tin come together, they give birth to the metal of bronze. And we have seen that there is a serpent of bronze that heals the Israelites out in the desert. This particular serpent, that serpent of our igneous powers. This is our individual, and particular Devi Kundalini. In the book of Ezekiel, Ezekiel writes, and their faces look like this. Each of the four had the face of a man, and on the right side, each had the face of a lion, and on the left, the face of an ox. Each also had the face of an eagle. Ezekiel writes this in his book because he is contemplating those beings that exist within that realm of Chokmah. These are the seraphim with their many wings and their four faces. One face is the face of a man. That face is associated with the dominion over the element of water. On the right side, the face of a lion. That is the face that brings the symbol of the element of fire. On the left, the face of an ox that symbolizes the element of earth. And the face of an eagle that symbolizes the element of air. So here, in the work of the super dynamic of love, men and women come together. And in that combination of the lingam and the yoni, without the release of the enseminis, we see that as they awaken the fire, they fuse their two metals, they bring forth that bronze, that it's that serpent that awakens their faculties, and they can become once again rulers of nature. Because they will eventually see, with the rising of that serpent, the power over the elements of earth and water and air and fire. This is why we see in the book of Numbers, when it is written that the Lord sent fiery serpents among the people, and that they bit the people, and much people of Israel died. Those fiery serpents, these are the very same the very same serpents of those chasms of sphere number 8, of that inferior hell of Uranus. But it continues by saying, therefore, the people came to Moses and said, we have sinned, for we have spoken against the Lord and against thee. Pray unto the Lord that he take away the serpents from us. And Moses prayed for the people. And the Lord said unto Moses, make thee a fiery serpent, and set it upon a pole, and it shall come to pass that everyone that is bitten, when he looketh upon it, shall live. When it says right here that people approach Moses so that Moses could interfere for them, that is the very same of the very same condition of us working internally with our innermost, of us reaching out and seeking for a way so that we can walk away from all of these conditions that are bringing us the suffering and the torments that we experience today. Torments that comes in so many different degrees. From little worries about not knowing what is it that is going to happen with that job interview, or the insecurities that we experience whenever we are approaching somebody new, or sometimes the discomfort that we feel when we are walking amongst a group and we would like just to not interact because we feel inadequate. Even at that small level, those are smaller torments that we all go through every so often. And on the other extreme, the torments of having to deal with many of the conflicts at home, with the problems of work, with confronting the misery and the suffering of others. But notice that the Lord said unto Moses, make thee a fiery serpent. Turn yourself into a serpent of fire. Turn yourself into a seraphim. And that is exactly what we are here to do. We are here to turn ourselves into fiery serpents, to be devoured by our own divine mother Kundalini, devoured in the way that she can save us because she is the only one with the power of eliminating of our psychological aggregates. And with that condition of being consumed by our divine mother, an internal transformation that takes place. Moses was a seraphim. And notice how in the creation that was chiseled on the stone by the great artist Michelangelo, notice how Moses is shown with two horns. Those two horns are beams of light. Those two rays of light that emanated from him the moment that he descended from the mountain after speaking to that burning bush. It is in that moment where he speaks to his internal real being that he is addressing the crown of life, that he is speaking with his own ancient of days. And we know this because when the voice behind that fire speaks to him, he says, I am that I am. In Hebrew, Echeye Asher Echeye. That, my friends, is the manifestation of God, of our real being, at the very same crown of the tree of life. But here, in this particular eighth sphere of hell, in this realm of Uranus, what we see is a realm that is governed by 768 laws. The amount of laws that we see here is unfathomable. The mechanicity and the brutality of the catabolic forces of nature is tremendous. Here at this point, we can see that time has pretty much stood still in the comedy. As Dante is speaking to some of these demons of hell, as he is speaking to some of these particular shades, they speak in terms of time, specific down to the hour and the minute where things have been happening. And they do that because time has become so slow that it becomes very perceptible. But the thing here is that as we approach this opposite from that realm of Chokmah, as we see the shade of that particular heaven in this particular sphere, we can not only but remind ourselves of the words of the Master when he says, all sins are forgiven except the sins against the Holy Spirit. And what we have seen here is that all of those shades that are suffering their torments in this particular sphere of hell, these are the shades of mediums, of fortune tellers and diviners. These are the shades of those who have sinned by simony, the sin of buying or selling sacred things. Just like all of these groups and pastors that are taking of the very little income and money that many families have, offering them, promising them a place in heaven. These are all those who are preaching that gospel of prosperity, of seed and prosperity. And while their people are suffering, and in many cases finding themselves even suffering from meal insecurities where they do not know from where their next meal is going to come from, they're meanwhile lavishing in riches, boasting about the millions of dollars in airplanes that they buy cash. Here in this sphere, we also see the falsifiers of metals. Falsifiers of metals are all those who offer doctrines that lead nowhere. Those alchemists who work with the metals of copper and tin, they can fuse them and create bronze. They can fuse them and awaken that serpent of bronze that will redeem them. But the falsifiers of metals, they will offer dark practices. They will offer doctrines that are completely useless and that do not result in the redemption and the salvation of man. Here we see also those who sow discord and scandal, the ones who create separation and dissent. Here we see the incestuous, and here we see the celibates who torture themselves, who mutilate themselves. Here we see the corrupted, we see thieves, and here we also see the shades of all those who awaken in darkness and for darkness. Again, friends, all sins are forgiven except the sins against the Holy Spirit. So we must, by all means, continue to work not only upon ourselves to effect the transformation, we also have to consider working in the three factors of the revolution of the consciousness. It is not just the idea of eliminating our defects because we would be afraid of suffering any one of these torments that likely we have suffered before many times as we have consumed our 108 lives time and time again. It has to do with also sacrificing for others. It is bringing off them the gnosis that they need, not because you are preaching to them, but because you are demonstrating it with your own actions. It is for us to sacrifice for others by not creating discord and separation between them and their things, them and their beliefs. It is by just bringing them the necessary wisdom so that they can make an internal transformation that allows them to leave behind those things that are indeed causing the suffering that they are experiencing. Friends, it is sacrificing for others by not considering ourselves self-sufficient, by pulling out a tarot deck or making use of our incipient abilities of clairvoyance and be telling people what they should do and they should not do. By starting to create a path where people start looking at us and revering us and thinking that we are there to save them. No. We must be able to demonstrate gnosis through our actions. And before anything else, all of our actions need to be honorable. Our thoughts have to be honorable. Our sentiments must be honorable. And our actions must be honorable as well. Because honorable is beyond integrity. Honorable is beyond honesty. Honorable is right there at the level of sacrificing for others, because behind honorable is indeed the force of love. But let's continue and let's walk down into the sphere of Neptune. The poets climb to the top of the stony chiasm that ends the eighth circle, and they begin their approach to the ninth and final circle, which is a great dark pit filled with ice and cold, strong winds that are caused by Lucifer, who is constantly beating his wings. One of the giants is Nimrod, the builder of the Tower of Babel, and he speaks in a nonsense tongue. Virgil reprimands Nimrod, calling him stupid and telling him that his horn is around his neck. Nimrod is condemned to Babel through eternity, not understanding and not being understood. This very same condition Samael shares with us, as he shares his experience in his descent into the realms of hell. He comes to say that as he walks into the ninth sphere, he comes across the remnants of an ego, and he sees it as a head that is just by itself on the ground. And the head is speaking and saying things, but nevertheless nothing is understandable of what that head is saying. And Samael says, as I saw that, I understood immediately what had happened there. That particular defect, it had already been destroyed. The only thing that was left behind was its own mechanicity. And thus, it was a head that right there on the ground was just babbling and saying nonsense stuff as it just continued to disintegrate. The second giant the poets encounter is Epilides, who endeavored with the other giants to war against the gods. Epilides is bound with a chain 5 times around his body. And the third giant that they meet is Antaeus. Virgil praises him for his deeds and strength on earth, and with his flattery, he gains passage on Antaeus' palm down to the bottom of the pit, which is the final circle of hell, the Cocytus. So moving further towards the center of hell, Dante accidentally kicks the face of a sinner who yells back at Dante, asking him, "Why would you want to cause him more pain?" Dante asked Virgil for a moment to speak with the sinner, and his wish was granted. The sinner asked Dante who he thinks he is, kicking the faces of sinners in Antenora, the second round of the ninth circle. And Dante grabs a handful of the shade's hair and threatens to tear it out if he does not give him his name. And the shade says that he does not care if Dante should rip until his brain lies bare. Dante and Virgil have walked into this space of hell called Cana or Caina. These are the traitors to their relatives. These are all those shades that are bound to a lake of ice. But this particular lake is of frozen blood. This realm is called Cana or Caina because in the Bible we see in that very first book of Genesis how Cain, a representation of our animal passions, abuses of his brother Abel. Cain is a symbol of our passions. Abel is a symbol of our consciousness. One was seen with favor by God and not the other one. And we know in the story that Cain killed Abel with a stone. That means that within us, there is an aspect that has made use of the work with the stone, which is that work that has to do with our sexual creative powers. And instead of using it for edifying and creating the superior bodies of the being, well, that stone was used to harm the consciousness. And thus, Dante and Virgil are walking around this particular realm, the sphere of nature that is known as Cana. These are all the traitors to their relatives. The shade begs Dante, as they continue walking, to remove the sheath of ice over his eyes so that he may cry freely for a while. As Dante and Virgil continue walking, they continue finding more shades that are submerged within this lake of frozen blood. And this one in particular is begging Dante just to remove the ice from the eyes so that they can at least cry. Dante promises to do it if the shades tell him his name, saying that he will go to the last rim of the ice if he does not keep his promise. The shade complies, saying that he was Friar Albergio. Dante, sure that Friar Albergio is not yet dead, is shocked at his confession. And Albergio tells Dante that his sin was so terrible that the moment he committed it, he was taken out of his body and thrusted in here, and that a devil took the place of his soul in his worldly body. Friends, in this particular sphere, Dante and Virgil are walking around the realm of Ptolemaea. These are people who become traitors to their guests. By now, from Cana and Ptolemaea, we have seen that we are facing the realm of the traitors. And these are suffering in such an intense change that they are bound in a condition where they can no longer move. The forces of nature are so intense and the mechanicity is so brutal in the ninth sphere that these shades have no freedom left. And that is symbolized here by being frozen in ice, and this particular shade begging just to get the ice out of their eyes so that they can at least cry. But what is interesting here is that Friar Albergio says that he committed such a heinous crime that he was taken out of his body and thrusted in there. This is something that happens amongst us every day. There are many of us humans walking in the face of this planet that are so cruel that we as humans have committed such heinous crimes that our Divine Mother will intervene immediately the moment that the crime is committed, just to be able to remove that psychological aggregate and plummet it directly into the spheres of hell, just to give whatever consciousness is left there a little more opportunity to be able to find the light. This is to the extent that our Divine Mother will operate. Many cases have been seen where people have committed crimes against others, like break into someone's home and commit a very serious murder. Instances where men have broken into a home, and in the home they have come across an old woman in her late 80s, in her 90s, and they have raped them. And as they are caught by police, there is no sign of emotion. There is no understanding of what has happened. They will claim themselves to be innocent. They do not understand the circumstances around them and about them. And the reason that has happened is because their individual and particular Divine Mother, at the moment that a sin like that such a heinous crime has been committed, she grabs that psychological aggregate and she extracts it from the psyche and she shoves it immediately into the sphere of hell so that it can start its destruction, because those aggregates are so dense and so perverse that the only way around them is for Divine Mother to intervene and just rip it out. And friends, this happens again to give that consciousness an opportunity. It says right here that the moment that happened, a devil took the place of his soul in his worldly body. What Dante is explaining here, that the moment that that psychological aggregate gets extracted, ripped, or torn out from that legion that that particular individual is carrying, there is then another ego that comes to take place. And we know this because when Dante refers to here to this thing called the devil, well, somehow speaks of our psychological aggregates as devilish as well, because they are the ones who cause separation. They cause division. They slander. They lead to hatred. So as those very destructive aggregates are removed deliberately by the Divine Mother, then there is another one that comes into play. And because that other one was not in control at the moment of the crime, they do not understand what happened. They look around and they think they're innocent. And of course, we judge them because we always think that we know better. And we further continue to accuse them. But this is what happens within their psyche. Dante and Virgil continue to walk down the sphere of hell. And as we get to Canto number 33, it opens with the sinner's tale. He was Count Ugolino, and the soul he was feeding upon was Archbishop Ruggieri, on whom he trusted. Ruggieri happened to imprison Ugolino and his four sons in a tower, and he nailed the door shut and he starved them all to death. So here we see how two people who knew each other experienced treason, and as one betrayed the other, he brought in so much torment that he brought them into a condition where he starved them to death. And thus, this is why Dante and Virgil see Ugolino feeding upon Ruggieri, and this happening, and this drama renewing itself time and time again until these shades cease to exist. Friends, this is what we see in this particular ninth sphere. And up in the heaven that corresponds to this particular ninth sphere of hell is the realm of Keter. This is the realm of the Ancient of Days. This is the sphere of Neptune. And notice how every time that we see Neptune, we see him as an old man that nevertheless is very corpulent. And he has long hair and a long beard. His hair and his beard is always adorned with 13 curls. That 13 is a reminder of Arcanum 13, which is the Arcanum of Death. Because for us to be able to reach that particular realm of heaven, we must indeed be very dead. There should be no psychological aggregate left. Because this is the realm of the Father, of our Father. We see that Neptune, Poseidon, as he is holding dominion over the waters, he is carrying a staff of wisdom. And that staff has three spears. Those three spears are three flames. And those flames, those are the flames of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. And Neptune is always carrying a crown because he is indeed the crown of life. He is our own Ancient of Days. But if that is what is up there in heaven, what corresponds in the ninth sphere of hell is the shadow of Poseidon, the shadow of Neptune. And that shadow has a name. And it is shown in the book of Revelations, chapter 9, verse 11. And it reads, they had as king over them the angel of the abyss, whose name in Hebrew is Abaddon, and in Greek, Apollyon. So we see Neptune, Apollo, the god of gods, the father of the gods, and in the abyss we see its shadow, Abaddon, Apollyon. Friends, in this ninth sphere of hell, we see a realm that is governed by 864 laws. Notice that 864 adds up to 18. 18 are all of our hidden enemies. In here, we see treason. In here, we see all of the acts of black magic. But that 18 also synthesizes as a 9. We must be able to descend all the way down to this ninth sphere. And that is the work of liberation. We see here, in this particular realm, our internal Judas, our internal Pilates, and our internal Caiaphas. We see Judas, we see Cassius, and we see Brutus. Satan is bound in the ice to his midpoint. And here he has three faces, a red one, a yellow one, and a black one. And in each one of his mouths, he is chewing a sinner. One face is red, one is yellow, and one is black, because those are the three colors of alchemy. Those are the three colors of the transmutation of our creative waters, because at first, our creative waters are black. But as we start working them, they eventually turn white. And as we continue transmuting of our creative energies, they will become fecundated by the fire and they will turn yellow. Ultimately, we will receive a cape. And it would be a cape that is red in color. That is the very same cape that the three magi were wearing when they came to bring presents the day of the birth of the Savior. And we see here those very same colors in the face of this demon. Virgil explains that Judas Iscariot, who betrayed the Christ, is the one in the middle and suffering the most, and that the other two are Brutus and Cassius, who betrayed the Caesar. We share this because the mysteries of supersexuality are present throughout the work of Dante. We see here how is it that all those who expressed and manifested betrayal, all the traitors end up reaching the ninth sphere of hell. And we have to start asking ourselves, how many times have I not betrayed? How many times have I not betrayed my spouse with my adultery? How many times have I not betrayed my spouse and my children, my friends, my colleagues at work by lying to them, by not being honorable? We are so fortunate that we have been given ways to be able to transcend these things, to be able to see, observe, and comprehend these defects, and to eliminate them. But the only way that we can do that is by learning of the cult of adoration of the feminine yoni. We have to start seeing our wives as the source of our salvation. We have to start betraying their trust. Every time that they are in need and they ask us for help and we think that they are nagging and we complain and we bring arguments, we have to stop all those dynamics. We have to start seeing them as the source of our salvation. We have to make use of the spear of our Divine Mother so that as we can bring the force of love into our marriage and allow it to nourish us and to flourish, that we can together become one. And as we work together, that our Divine Mother, through her spear of Minerva, that she can destroy the psychological aggregates that keep us and those around us in suffering. Friends, it is in this particular ninth sphere of hell that we see all those who are expiating themselves because of their crimes of high treason. And we have seen crimes of high treason based on all those who forged medals and offered false doctrines, like in the massacre that happened in Guyana in the late 1960s, where that pastor called Jim Jones invited all of his followers to commit suicide. And they did. He promised them a salvation that never materialized. It is here where we see all of those psychological aggregates that have to do with self-sufficiency. Those who create our internal tower of Babel. Those aspects of us that think that we have everything under control and that we have the solutions to all the problems. That is a fallacy. We have to start operating directly through the yearning and the works of the innermost. Because we are void of the law of epigenesis. We do not have the ability to create new circumstances. We are bound to the law of recurrence. But the one way that we can break away from the mechanical law of recurrence is through the work in the ninth sphere. And last but not least, Dante and Virgil reach the very bottom of the ninth sphere, which is the realm of Judeca. These are the ones who are traitors to their lords and their benefactors. And we see that the shades continue frozen in that lake of blood. And we see the very same demon that has its three faces frozen within the lake of blood itself. And every time this demon tries to escape, he shakes his wings. And as he bats his wings, he generates a stream of air that is so cold that freezes things even further, locking himself in there even more. So Dante and Virgil, as they get to this realm, they continue walking a path and they happen to see themselves then walking out of hell. They notice a clearing, and as they follow that pathway, they eventually come once again outside of the realm of hell, out on the other side. And they once again can see the light. They once again can see the stars of the night. And this is exactly what happens to our consciousness as the trip down the realms and the spheres of hell is completed. Once the consciousness is purified and all of those psychological aggregates are destroyed, It is then that we can exit that realm of purification. And the angels of life will receive us and inspect our consciousness, certify that it is indeed very clean and pure. And it is right then and there where the consciousness can once again see the light. Those essences, those monads that walk out of the spheres of hell, based on the transmigration of the souls, they have to start once again their transmigration, starting at the mineral kingdom. And as they reach that mastery, then go on into the plant kingdom and then into the animal kingdom, so that eventually, after thousands of years and many cycles of lives, that they can once again receive another human body from that fourth aspect of our Divine Mother, so that we can then have an opportunity to transcend from the human realm into the angelic realm. It is important to see that in this exit, Dante and Virgil can look at the sky and they can see the stars. Because the stars are not just specks of light in the heavens. These are the bodies and the primordial intelligences of constellations and suns and galaxies. This is the light that emanates out of these divine beings. So that is a symbol of how the consciousness is once again having the opportunity not only to be at the presence of these great beings, but to be able to once again interact with them. So friends, this has been our seminar in the 9 spheres of hell. We would like to give special thanks to Cliff Notes for allowing us an opportunity to be able to look at their material and synthesize the deep and profound context that Dante offers in his comedy. And of course, to all of the sources out of which we were able to get the images from the Gustave Doré and be able to put this presentation together for you. So friends, this has been the Spheres of Dante, Part 6, the Spheres of Uranus and Neptune. Thank you for joining us this evening, and may all beings be happy.